it's Rob here again with Freestyle Enduro 101. Want to talk to you today about bike setup. What I have here is a 2019 Beta 300RR Race Edition, and what I want to cover today is things that I did to the suspension, seat height, gearing, and tires on the bike. Just some simple things that you can do to your bike that usually doesn't break the bank. On the suspension with the Beta Race Edition, it just seemed like it was a little bit harsh compared to their regular edition Beta with the other suspension on it. So what I did is on the front forks, you can actually adjust the fork oil height in the forks, which makes the forks a little bit more compliant, you know, when you put a little bit less fork oil in it. So the range on this particular model is 325 cc's to 400 cc's. When I drained the oil out of the forks, it had a little bit more than 400 cc's in each fork. That might have been, you know, why the forks were a little bit harsh going over roots. And keep in mind, a lot of the riding that we do around here is tight, you know, single track riding. We're literally going from tree to tree. So, and there's a lot of roots and chatter on the trail. So what I ended up doing is, when I put the fork oil back in, I only put 325 cc's back in each fork. And keep in mind, that's just on the outer chamber. I'm not opening up the inner chamber of the fork. That's just the outer chamber. It's real simple to do it. You pull the forks out, unscrew the top, and you pour the oil out. I usually let it hang upside down for at least a day, and then the next day, you know, just put the new fork oil in it. Well, when I put the 325 cc's in it, it helped the fork out a lot. It's a lot plusher going over roots, much more compliant. It moves through its stroke better. Also, the rebound is turned all the way soft, so counterclockwise on the rebound on the bottom of the forks. On the compression, it's all the way out counterclockwise. So I went soft on the compression and the rebound, and that helped out a whole lot as well, going over the roots and stuff to the woods. When we turn up the pace a little bit, maybe trying to go a little bit of a race pace, I might go in like 3 clicks on the compression, and the rebound, I usually keep it the same, but I'll play around with it, go in 2 or 3 clicks. But I found that the softer setting works best for all the main types of riding that we do around here. Another issue that a lot of the dirt bikes have nowadays is they're just way too tall. You just about got to be 6 foot or better to really be able to dab and keep control of the bike when you're going in slow technical situations, especially in the tight woods. So I almost sold this bike to get the Beta X trainer just to get the shorter seat height. Decided I'd play around with this a little bit just to see how it would work with the sag and everything. A lot of times you hear, you know, 100 millimeters of sag. If you got to go more than 100, you know, millimeters, then you probably should send your shock off or whatever, or, you know, 100 billion things out there on the interweb that tells you to send your suspension off. Now, this is stuff that, you know, I tried to do without sending off my suspension. So I actually went 115 millimeters of sag on the rear shock. That helped out quite a bit. Also, I put a 1-inch lower seat on the bike. So right now, without me sitting on the bike is 35.5 inches tall. An X Trainer, the stock height on their spec sheet is 35.8. So actually right now, at 115 millimeters of sag, I'm at 35.5 inches tall seat height without sitting on the bike. Now, since I've softened up the shock by, you know, getting that 115 millimeters of sag, and I got the high and low speed compression all the way soft, which is counterclockwise, and I've got the rebound all the way soft. Another thing I need to tell you is, when you back your clickers all the way out, like on your rebound, when you go all the way till it stops, I always go back in one just to make sure that that circuit is open and I'm getting good oil flow through that circuit. helped out tremendously. Now when I sit on this bike, I'm actually sitting lower than I would on a Beta X trainer. So took care of that problem. Now the seat height is much better for me. I've got a 30-inch inseam, and I can almost sit flat-footed with my riding boots on when I'm sitting on the bike. It didn't give the bike any ill manners. The bike handles great in the woods. I haven't had any problems with the bike bottoming out when I go off of jumps in the woods, which aren't big jumps, big motocross jumps or triples or anything. But some of them are pretty good sized jumps. The suspension works beautiful. It's compliant. My weight, I range anywhere from 165 to 175 pounds, and all these adjustments seem to work really good for my weight range. It's going to be different for what you weigh. So covered the suspension, got the suspension working real good. Don't think I need to send the suspension off to get anything done. Even if I turn it up to a race pace, the suspension still works good. I just may have to turn in the compression a little bit. So got the suspension taken care of. The next thing I ran into was the gearing. The gearing on the bike was a bit too tall for the tight woods riding. So on the front sprocket, went to the 12 tooth on the front sprocket. On the rear sprocket, went to the 52 tooth rear sprocket. That lowered my gearing quite a bit for in the woods, and now the bike seems to me to be much more controllable, and I can run even higher gears now in the woods. My gear selections just seem to be more fitted for tight woods riding with the 12-52 sprocket. I didn't go out and buy, real expensive sprockets. I think the front sprocket was like, $14. The rear sprocket was like $36 or something. I did get an aluminum rear sprocket because I just wanted to try it out and see how it works. But so far, the aluminum rear sprocket is holding up very well for me. The bike's got 76 hours on it, and I haven't had any problems out of the bike. The bike's been just great. But another thing that I did to the bike to make it just a little bit more compliant in the woods is I went to a Shinko 216 MX fatty front tire. I run about 10 pounds of pressure in it with an extreme duty tube. It's a real thick inner tube in there. What I found is running the fatty tire, it just gives you that little bit of extra, almost like suspension cushion, and it even softened it up that much more for going over the roots. On the rear tire, I went with a Shinko 525. It's a pretty soft tire, and that made it a lot more compliant too. Now the stock tires, don't get me wrong, on these bikes I think are excellent, and a lot of people have said they're garbage, they throw them out. But I've got another bike that I'm doing testing on, and it's got the stock tires on it, and it's running great. Just the thing is with this race edition, that little bit stiffer suspension to make it just a little bit more compliant, that fatty tire, helps out a whole lot. On the grips, all the bikes, I always put a soft pillow grip on it. These are I think Torque One Racing grips. I'm not a salesman for Torque One Racing. It's just a grip that I found that I like. I think Renthal or some of the other brands, I think it's the exact same grip, they just put a different name on it. But anyhow, they're a softer grip, and I found that they're a lot easier on the hands, and they take a lot more of the shock out when you're riding in the woods. It does help, just that little bit extra. So on the motor side of things, the motor's stock, haven't done anything to the motor other than adjust the power valve. Now on the power valve, when I bought this bike, it came with two big springs. It came with a green spring and a yellow spring. I tried them both, and I ended up with the yellow spring. Also, in the little kit that they gave with the bike, there's a smaller gray, almost white spring. I did end up putting that in as well. So I've got the yellow big spring and that grayish white smaller spring in there as well, and I've got the power valve adjusted out flush. It works great in the woods. And keep in mind, this is all for tight woods riding. It may not work for somebody out in the desert, but the bike runs so nice. It's got so much torque, so much controllable torque with that spring setup that I just ended up keeping that in there. So anyhow, I just wanted to give you that little bit of information to maybe help everybody out, maybe save you some money. I know that you know, weight ranges and whatnot, you may be way too heavy for the bike, and yes, you may have to send the suspension off, or you know, too light for the bike. But for me, 165, 175 pounds, you could probably go lighter and a little bit heavier. It's just worked out beautiful for me. So I'm going to take the bike out and I'm going to put it in some different situations, and I'm going to show you how good the bike works with these adjustments and how it's not doing anything quirky. Also, one last thing before I forget, I did mess with the fork height a little bit. I know stock, it's you got these little hash marks on your fork tubes, and I think stock was to the top hash mark. Ended up moving the forks up to the second hash mark, so that means there's 2 hash marks above the triple clamp on the top. That did give a little bit of an ill manner to the bike. The bike seemed like it didn't want to turn as good, so I did put it back to stock. I just tried that to even lower the bike more, but I think the bike's great to, you know, with the lowering of it, especially since I was going for the X-Trainer height. So anyhow, hope this helps everybody out. Let's get this bike out here. Let's test it out. I'll show you some footage of how it works.